You look at it, and while we're growing in Pennsylvania, if you want to sell your product anywhere else, you're at the mercy not just of the federal regulations, but other states. You have states like Ohio, I believe, banned smokable hemp flower. Texas, you're at the mercy of extraterritorial leaders. And I don't know what you can really do to prepare other than have a backup plan. I think the biggest thing that anyone should always be prepared for, because it's that thing that every season you hear at the end of the season is, I can't sell my crop now, or what am I going to do with my crop? And it's just really making sure that before you put the seeds in the ground, you have like 2 or 3 backup plans.
That's Jason Hawley, a business owner and hemp grower at Hempsylvania, a hemp company in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. So on today's show, we'll talk to Jason about Hempsylvania and how his experience in the tobacco industry informs his hemp operation. We'll talk about compost tea and hemp as an animal feed. But before we get to that, we'll have another one of our fiber-side chats, this time with Brianna Kilcullen, the founder of Anact, a company that uses hemp fiber to make high-quality bath towels, just one of the hundreds of thousands of end uses for industrial hemp. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Hemp Depot, where they're offering feminized high CBD Boax and Cherry HD seeds, seedlings, and clones, perfected over 5 years of iteration and testing. Hemp Depot stands behind what they sell, offering 50% financing and a THC guarantee against your crop going hot. So whether you're a first-time grower or a veteran, Hemp Depot is here for you. Call 844-436-7234 or go online at cbdseedco.com. Okay, so we're going to have another one of our fiber side chats, this time with an entrepreneur from Jacksonville, Florida by the name of Brianna Kilcullen, whose company Anact is making bath towels from hemp fibers. Brianna Kilcullen, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. Could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Eric. My name is Brianna Kilcullen. I am the founder of Anact. Anact is short for enact. So we want to inspire people to take simple acts to create impact each time they use our product. And our act was bringing to life a hemp-based towel made out of 55% hemp, 45% organic cotton that we believe is better for all people and the planet.
Okay. Why did you choose hemp? What is it about this material that attracted you to it?
I chose hemp more so because of my background working in textiles and being exposed to conventional cotton and synthetic fibers such as polyester, rayon, nylon. And so for me, I just saw this incredibly negative impact that these fibers that we use and wear every day have on the planet. And I was just always looking for natural fibers that had performance features that I was looking for in my textiles. And when I stumbled upon hemp, I was just completely enamored with the way it was grown and the impact it had, but also on its performance features of being biostatic, meaning it resists the growth of bacteria due to its molecular structure. And it just made complete sense that we would reintroduce this fiber back into society, and we would want to be using it and wearing it every day.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the negative impacts of those synthetic fibers and cotton?
Sure. So there's a great documentary. It's called The True Cost that I highly recommend anyone interested in knowing about the textile industry watch, because it shows, so conventional cotton farming is really largely run by Monsanto. I know this is the farming podcast, so I know a lot of people probably are familiar with Monsanto, so I won't go into depth. But essentially, there's a lot of schemes that are set up that put farmers in situations in which they are having to purchase seeds. They're having to purchase insecticides and pesticides, and they're having to do that on an annual basis and get stuck financially. And not only that, but it's also ruining the soil. And so they're just constantly having to try to get the same quality and output that they get maybe the first year or two from working with conventional cotton and working with all of the different resources that are provided. And then it just slowly starts to deteriorate. And so I've actually met farmers in India, I met the farmers, but I met families of farmers who have committed suicide. India has one of the largest suicide rates because of the cotton farming industry there. So that was really impactful for me from a natural fiber perspective of seeing like there was gaps that needed to happen. Or there was gaps in our system that needed to be addressed. And then from a synthetic side, it's really because these resources are finite. And that is what I find detrimental is that, we're projecting population growth and, we want to sell to this, but we have a limited amount of those resources. And not only that, but when we are complete or when people are done with them, we're not designing for end of life. So these products are very difficult to break down, and they end up a lot of times being thrown into our landfills, which then emit toxic emissions, which then contribute to climate change. So those were the main reasons that really stuck with me.
And when did you start designing and making these Anact towels?
I had the idea in August 2017, so almost 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it really came from my own personal problem. I was frustrated with the current towels that we have on the market. We have these very thick plush towels. And I was living near the beach in San Diego. I didn't have, a washer or dryer. And my towels just were picking up this gross smell. They weren't drying quickly. I was having to constantly go to the laundromat. And I really was like, well, I want a hemp towel and this is how I want it. And so I went on and the market online to find it, and I saw that no one was doing it. And so that was really where it all started, was designing a towel for my own personal problem with the expectation that other people had that problem too. Okay. And it's just kind of evolved from there. I never went to design school. So I basically would buy all of the towels and start picking and pulling together the towels that the type of texture, the weave, the design that were something that I wanted. And that was how the designing process evolved.
And you said it's a blend of hemp and cotton. Why did you have to do a blend?
Right. So when I initially started out, I wanted it to be 100% hemp. But then there was two main factors. One, the cost, because there is so little supply of hemp, the price is much higher. And I wanted to ensure that we could compete with a regular, just be able to compete in the towel market. So I didn't want to outprice us and not be able to sell the product and then, be able to one day have the price be lowered because there would be more supply once people saw the demand. That was the first thing. The second thing was that we just don't really have the infrastructure and the technology yet because we've invested so much in cotton as a fiber. So there is still, the weight of the hemp and the type of weave that you create just isn't comparable with without it being blended. So those were the two main factors, performance and cost.
Okay. But in the future, it could be possible, with advanced technology to create an all hemp towel?
Yeah. I think that the textile industry has so many possibilities, and including how we innovate with hemp. But we just haven't focused a lot we focus mostly on CBD, right? As opposed to other ways.
Yeah, here in the States, it's all about CBD. There is, growing fiber industry, but yeah, it's small, but hopefully we're on the path to change that. So where do you source your hemp?
So we source from China. That's where pretty much all hemp fiber comes from right now. So you can get yarn and have it manufactured in other places, but anyone who's making content claim with hemp as a fiber is most likely all coming from China.
Do you plan to continue sourcing it there, or would you source it from the U.S. if the supply was available?
I would happily source it from the US. I believe, with Enact, we have been growing globally. So my vision is that we're able to grow locally to the markets and sell them, whether that is here or elsewhere. But since we are based here and that is our number one focus, I did reach out to towel manufacturers. There are some factories here. And unfortunately, they just weren't interested in investing in hemp and had a lot of them run on wholesale. So having a new startup brand and designing, they weren't interested. And I know there are some people who talk about that they can do hemp fiber, but the biggest thing that I just want to share is that providing a sample is so critical. And perhaps maybe if we were a larger brand, we could be able to say like we can do this R&D and invest in it. But being a startup where we believe our opportunity is creating the market, we don't have the capability or the capital to really, work side by side with someone to say, let's get this seed and see what's happened and follow all of it. Which is why, we're doing podcasts and doing things to get the word out so that people who do have those resources can do that. But absolutely, without hesitation, I would love to do it. I just haven't seen anyone be able to provide something that we could use at this point in time.
What are some of the other challenges that you faced being a startup in this hemp space?
One of the biggest ones is just all of the negative stigma that comes with cannabis and hemp. And so there's a lot of times where we don't even really sometimes get to talk about the towel or even share who we are because people are just stuck on hemp. And so it's like a 30-minute education of, okay, no, this is what it is. This is what's not. Yeah.
Yeah, they make the jokes about smoking the towel.
Yes, my dad actually has, when we first were trying to come up with the name, he's like, we just call it high and dry. I'm like, Dad, we can't play to that. He's like, no, it's great. Like he has all these things and he like thinks it's hilarious. And I'm like, no, you can't do that because like people, you're feeding into it. We have to like break it. But that's a huge challenge. And so the lack of education to the customer on that front. And so, a lot of people might be looking for a sustainable towel, might be looking for a towel that has our performance features, but they're never going to Google hemp towel because they're already thinking, am I Googling, a towel made out of drugs? Like, what is this? So that's a huge challenge.
Right. Yeah. There's a guy that I've interviewed a couple of times on the show. He's also in Florida. Bruce Michael Dietzen. He's made.
Yeah, I know him.
Oh, you know him. Yeah. And he gets
yeah.
that same joke all the time. Can you smoke the car?
Yeah.
And it's got to be so frustrating. It's like, no, you're missing the point.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, we spoke on a panel last year that it was Florida's first inaugural hemp conference in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
So we spoke on it, from okay, everyone's focused on CBD, but what are the other end uses? And so it was at least a educated audience, so we didn't get peppered with those questions. But if you like remove yourself from the hemp industry, it's like, oh, here we are again.
Right. Yeah, when I started doing the show, I guess in 2018, that was one of my initial questions, like, does that stigma matter? Does the marijuana stigma matter? And it does, just because of that educational barrier. Like in reality, no, it doesn't matter because it's a manufactured stigma. They invented it. They changed people's perception, and now everyone has to deal with getting over that. But yeah, it's frustrating.
It is. And that's why I was really adamant that we didn't include hemp in our branding. And we show, and this is, what I share with everyone is that you lead with talking about its performance features and like how you're solving these problems, as opposed to just leading with hemp because you're just going to add one more thing on your plate. Obviously you don't want to deceive anybody and just be like, take all of this and then, oh, surprise, it's hemp. But I think that, you have to be really careful. And I think until there is more top down or however it would come about education around the differences, then it's just, don't add to your plate.
Right. How is the pandemic affecting your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we were planning, we were going to have this huge launch party in Jacksonville where we're based. And I woke up in the morning, and that was when the borders had started to close and things were really starting to go in lockdown. And I just knew that it just wasn't going to be good. And so I immediately canceled our launch party. So we had this huge party with like a bunch of media contacts we had reached out to, and it was going to be like boom, and then go to NoCo, and we were going to, hit the ground running
Right.
as a like trade shows, conventions were here, like this is us, like because I did a Kickstarter last year, and that was how we were able to finance our first round of inventory and go to market. And so I had this inventory remaining from our first bulk order after the Kickstarter orders were fulfilled. But I was like, okay, cool. Like now we have this great runway for growth where we can just kind of figure out the right formula that makes sense for us and where we want to be. And it just evaporated overnight. And I just was like, oh boy. And I think I just took like a weekend of silence where I just sat back and really thought, where do we go from here? And what does this look like? And so it was hard, but now I'm really grateful. We're actually growing. I think people are now looking for products that perform the way that ours perform. They're looking for brands that are making a difference that they can feel good about. And, we kind of dodged a bullet in the sense that we're now forced to figure out how to be 100% digital and
Right.
online. And so it was like a little bit of a fear of mine, but it forced me to face it without having to do the trade show circuit. And so I'm grateful. So I feel like any of these things are really, just how you decide to look at it. And so I think it's a blessing, but we're doing well, thankfully. So
Good. Yeah, attitude is always so important.
yeah.
Getting back to hemp in China. So it's my understanding that the retting process in China is sort of chemical based. Can you talk a bit about that, and how does that sort of fall into your idea for sustainability?
Sure. So I traveled to China in July of last year, and I wanted to visit each component of the supply chain to understand the processing and
Mm-hmm.
see it firsthand because it's just been my experience. That's how I've learned. And there's so many, things that you'll hear about it, but it's until you see it that I feel like you can really speak to it and understand it. So that being said, I'll be transparent that I didn't see the retting. I got all the way to the yarn. But the harvest was going to be a couple weeks later.
Okay.
I've spoken to a couple of people who are hemp manufacturers, and it's just really hard. It's kind of like, saying, hey, like, I love your podcast, but like, can you tell me about all the things are uncomfortable about it and like share it, right? You're like, so like, those are my sources of who I would be asking. And
Right.
so I think there is like a very kind of fine line that you have to walk. And so I have read different reports, but I just haven't personally seen it to understand it. So I wouldn't want to share that. But I think that there is so much innovation that just could happen in general in the processing. But because of the lack of supply, I just really don't have a good benchmark to look and compare that to.
So where are your towels available? Are they in stores, or is this something you can only buy online?
You can buy online at anact.com. We also haven't partnered with any larger chains at this point. We've had some offers from some pretty big retail brands, but I want to really be able to grow organically so that we don't, kind of lose who we are. If you're in the South, in Jacksonville, we're in several boutique retailers. We're actually in a boutique hotel right now, a couple of yoga studios. So we have like a really interesting opportunity to be in a lot of different channels where towels exist. But the best way to reach us is at anact.com, and we also do wholesale as well.
Okay, and that's anact.com.
Correct.
Cool. Is there anything else you would like our listeners to know about either your business or hemp in general?
The only thing I can say is we get hit up so often with people who have ideas and want to do different things. And I used to spend a lot of time like connecting, and because I was like, this is so cool, that's a great idea. Let's see what we can do. But I think the best way that you can support is by getting the market going and doing like your piece of the pie wherever that looks, So if you want to grow, but you're not able to because you don't see the market, then helping like support brands that are advocating for that and have a product that can help get you there, help get us all there is awesome. Also, just continuing to educate. And, as we're going into like this past weekend, we had the protest here on behalf of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And this week is Hemp History Week. So something that I really would love to see and what we're also advocating for is how do we bring in people who have been marginalized because of the cannabis industry and create social equity that way.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I will often bring this up with listeners. It's like, what responsibility does the new hemp industry have for that social injustice that's been happening for, generations now?
Totally.
It seems like there's a lot of rich white guys making money when there's a lot of, just regular people of color just put in jail and marginalized and, families decimated. And so I think that's something that everybody needs to be thinking about.
Exactly. And, there's we've tried to really change how we discuss, because it was great to say, okay, the hemp or the US flag was made out of hemp fiber. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they owned hemp farms, because it was this great way to show this intrinsic connection to the US history. Mm-hmm. But now we're trying to really push past it and say, okay, they owned the farm, but they weren't the actual farmers. Right. Who were those farmers? And then it brings up the conversation of people who were enslaved and who have continued to not be able to reap the benefits from this crop. And so that is something I just feel really passionate about. And to your point, there seems to be with any new industry, a certain group of people that kind of get to jump in and take advantage of it. But I think the real opportunity with hemp, because so many of our infrastructures for these industries have left this country, is that how do we talk about bringing them back, but including the people who started them? And I think that that's one of the most beautiful things that hemp provides all of us. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, there's many opportunities to build something brand new and inclusive.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Brianna, it's been great talking to you. Thank you for your time today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for creating the space to talk about these really important issues.
These are important issues. Hemp is an important issue. So there's this famous quote from an Italian philosopher by the name of Antonio Gramsci. You've probably heard it before. It goes like this: the old world is dying, and the new world struggles to be born. And now is the time of monsters. Oh boy, that seems to sum up the world right now, doesn't it? Oy, such a strange place planet Earth is in the year 2020. But I believe that there's a bright spot. in all of this chaos, and it's the hemp industry. This plant, the community surrounding it, this will bring healing to this fractured world, right? That is my sincere hope anyway, and that is why I continue on this journey of education and illumination. And I thank you for joining me on this journey. Anyway, enough philosophizing. Let's get to the next interview. Here's Jason Holly from Hempsylvania. Jason Holly, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. Could you introduce yourself for us, please?
I'm Jason Holly. I'm the president of Hempsylvania Incorporated, located in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, and been doing growing industrial hemp now for a few years, both in Pennsylvania and Colorado, and started the endeavor here in 2019. Hempsylvania went official, and looking forward to this season and talking with you today about some of the interesting things that we see coming up with the hemp.
So what's the nature of the business? Obviously you grow hemp in Pennsylvania, but what's the business model?
Our model is really, we're a small scale farming operation. We're farming ourselves, and really have been focused on not so much the farming aspect or the regulatory process, because it's been so fluid. We've really just been focusing on building up our brand position in terms of finding the right products that fit the right slots, and then kind of almost backwards engineering our growing and our operations around the product development, which is a little bit different than some other people might be doing it, where they're starting out and moving forwards, and we're kind of working from the backwards side of things, just because we understood at the beginning that this industry was going to take a lot of time to really evolve and kind of figure out what pathways in terms of distribution are going to be the most relevant to the hemp industry, and making sure that whenever we go into cultivating something or growing something, not only do we know what it's going to end up as a final product, but also making sure that we're able to maintain all the things that consumers want in their products, which would be consistency, quality, and safety. So it's really just been, from anything, we've been really letting the industry take us to where it needs to go, as opposed to trying to build something that would be much more difficult to move around, so to speak, if the regulations were to change. Okay.
Well, give me an example of a product that you came up with and then sort of reverse engineered the growing form.
Well, I mean, my background is, and this is something that probably you didn't know, is I came from the tobacco industry, the premium cigar industry, and I've been working in that industry for 14 years. Was recently handling the marketing for the largest white labeler for Altria, a company in the Dominican Republic that makes all the Black and Milds and Marlboros for everywhere but the United States. And through that experience, learned kind of the big tobacco side of things, but also on the premium, the cigar side, we see hemp as something that's going to disrupt tobacco in a way on the smokable side. And hemp bars, for example, would be one product. We bought the domain Hemp Bar and hempbars.com probably back in 2018.
That was Hemp Bar?
What's that?
Hemp Bar? Spell that for me.
Oh, sure. Hemp Bar, kind of like a portmanteau of the word hemp and cigar. So HEMPBAR. If you Google it now, you'll start seeing people refer to, like a hemp style cigar, where the filler would be, hemp flower, using either a tobacco outer wrapper or any other kind of outer wrapper you can use. That was the one thing that really happened that kind of threw a loop for us, maybe that other hemp companies didn't experience, is being that we're more tobacco centric. With my experiences being in the tobacco industry, the FDA regulations that came about in terms of substantial equivalence and the pre-market tobacco application pathways, they really changed the way we would want to do things, because it's really difficult now to put a new product on the market that involves tobacco. So that was another consideration that's led us to really crawl, walk, run before really trying to get into that, rolling hemp and putting it on shelves, because there are those FDA considerations that we have to take into mind.
So you do have hemp bars out there?
Hemp bars, we've been prototyping, and like I said, the big issue has been, there's a couple of different things that from the smokable flower side of things that I've heard other people talk about on your podcast as well, is that, when it comes to the 0.3 THC threshold, that is on that finished product. And when you're using flour, it's very difficult to homogenize a flour. So you're going to have issues with testing in terms of compliance with flour until the genetics really were caught up to where they need to be able to go and pack, 15 grams of, say, hemp flour and be sure that you're going to be compliant with your 0.3 percentage.
Right.
That was one big issue. That's just been something that I think that's why you see a lot of people, especially a lot of the big chains, unwilling to get into some of the smokable side, is because they're concerned about, when you're using flour, it's much more different and difficult to test than when you're using like a liquid or, like a salve or anything else. So I think the concept of finished flour products and the regulations make it a little bit more of a daunting product paradigm to like dive into, because you're when you're blending flour together, you have to, in the end, come down to that compliance issue at 0.3. That's just something you don't face in cigars.
Right. So how do you sit for this year? You feel good about your genetics and your compliance?
I think we actually, this year is going to be a great year for us to be able to take the product to the market, because we're going to be growing a significant amount of THC-free, high CBG flower. So we were lucky enough to get our hands on Tesoro Genetics, brought the Panacaya strain in from the University of Seville in Spain, and it's been testing anywhere from 14 to 18% on the cannabigerol, the CBG content, with absolutely zero detectable THC.
Wow. Okay, well, let's talk about your farming operation. Can you describe sort of the lay of the land up there in Luzerne?
Yeah, I mean, we have this season, we have 2 farms, our total acreage of about 25 acres between the 2 of them. We farm completely organically. One of our fields is certified organic. The other field we're actually certifying this season. It was a dormant dairy farm for about 10 years, and they hadn't grown anything on it. We rented it from them and went in and started work on the infrastructure and going to have them certified organic. We really go in and we don't really cover crop per se, but we're drip lining everything. We cultivate a little bit differently than some other people do. And a lot of that comes that my partner in Hempsylvania comes from Boulder, Colorado, and has an operation out of there, has been farming for about 7 years. So a lot of the methods and some of the things that he's run into, we're able to kind of engineer that into our growing operation out here to avoid some of the.
Can you share? Can you share some of those differences in cultivation practices?
Sure. I mean, like just in general, we don't use anything other than everything's natural product wise. So, I mean, we use a compost tea recipe that is the backbone of our growing operation, and it really avoids us having to use anything else from the conventional side of things. That would be, an amendment or an intervention for, pests, molds, funguses, things like that. Our compost tea that we pump through does a really good job. We do some foliar spraying with it. We do. I'd say the things that we do a little bit differently, super cropping, just things during the growing season, going through on plant maintenance, just making sure that we're getting the most out of what we have in the ground and not leaving it all to nature. I'd say the hand care that we try and put into the plant, each plant, make sure we do the math and figure out each plant's going to get probably about 4 or 5 minutes of personal attention throughout the season. So when you roll up the acreage and you roll up the plant count, and you're talking about maybe 50, 60,000 plants, it all adds up into the man hours. So it's really getting the crew out there that we have, training them, making sure that they understand what our end goal is, and then just providing them with the some of the old tricks, the old growers methods that we've been able to migrate out from the West Coast, and just making sure that our crops are really looked at daily, and we're very proactive. It's a lot easier to prevent something than it is to cure something when you're out in the agricultural sphere.
Right. The compost tea, can you explain that system? Like, how big are the batches? What are you mixing them in? What are your inputs into that? Yeah,
we do an aerated compost tea. So it's a nice mixture of, you got your molasses and your biochar and your different, your inoculant. like worm castings. We aerate it. We try not to keep it from getting too warm so it doesn't kill off some of that good bacteria that we're seeking to get out there that gets in there and aerates the roots. So, I mean, we do really large batches. We're using at least 400 gallon at a time, containers in our batches. And we're putting a good bit out there. So, always keeping it brewing the entire season and ready to apply it. Heavier if needed, if some issue, brings itself. Otherwise it's just there as part of our regular, regular feed programming.
Okay. And then where do you source the input material?
All over. Everything's OMRI. We want to make sure that because we're organic on the one field and we're going to be organic on the other, we use everything, making sure that we're following all the protocols of the organic program, but we try and source everything from Pennsylvania first. I know we were dealing with Fertrells out of the Danville area. We get I know we get fish from them, some other stuff from them. There's some great suppliers. Now we're just starting to explore some Pennsylvania mushroom growing facilities to get, triaxle loads of mushroom soil tilled in just before we plant. We're always just trying to build up the permaculture,
Sure.
add to our fields and as much as we can.
Couple of different questions there.
Sure.
Are you able to recycle any of the plant material into your compost tea at the end of the season?
We didn't do that last season. It's funny. I was just playing around with I have some stocks left over from last year that were just, left out to ret and to see, what the time and weather did to them. And the durability of this plant just blows my mind on a constant basis.
Yeah.
It's just how it holds up even after, we're talking about 7 or 8 months of nature's elements being outside. And the idea of maybe chipping it, we did run through, some hemp stalks through a chipper, like a chipper shredder, and it made really nice material. If that's something that we could actually go ahead and do, I'll be honest with you, we're trying to stay away from that because we're really hopeful that in the next couple of years we can start using some of that material to feed animals. And
Right.
We'd really like to, we're waiting basically for AVCO to signal that they've approved hemp in the diet of animals again, and we can start doing that. That's where we really think there's going to be a lot of progress, both in the poultry, the pork and the beef industries in terms of feed.
Yeah. So would it be an easy sort of pivot for you to get, go from CBG production into like grain production for poultry feed?
No, I don't know that it would be something we would necessarily produce. We're not set up for that level of production, and it probably would create such a drain on resources to go into that direction that we'd want to partner with someone who's got a good industrial footing, that's already been doing 1,000+ acres or has pivots, and someone that can really go out there and do that large volume, because the amount of material you're going to need to feed animals, I mean, we're talking, thousands and thousands of acres. Of industrial size, style growing to be able to get the pelletized and the hemp seed cakes, all the things that need to be created for that industry.
What other issues are you thinking about that you think maybe other hemp farmers should also be thinking about? Like what issues do you see coming your way, or what are you dealing with now?
I mean, I think the constant issue, just the one that's so difficult, is regulatory, because you look at it, and while we're growing in Pennsylvania, if you want to sell your product anywhere else, you're at the mercy not just of the federal regulations, but other states. You have states like Ohio, I believe, bans smokable hemp flower. Texas, I think, is banning smokable hemp flower right now.
Indiana too is trying to. Right?
Exactly. So you're at the mercy of extraterritorial leaders. And I don't know what you can really do to prepare other than have a backup plan, or just really be ready to. I think the biggest thing that anyone should always be prepared for, because it's that thing that every season you hear at the end of the season is, I can't sell my crop now, or what am I going to do with my crop? And it's just really making sure that before you put the seeds in the ground, you have like 2 or 3 backup plans, because it's never, it seems like it's always the case that it's going to either the first case going to fall through, or there's something's going to happen. And I think that's the one thing people, they come into growing hemp, and they realize at the end of the year, they either have to take it all down and they don't have the labor, or they don't have a place to put it, or they can't finish it. and they get stuck into a mold scenario. And it's just something that I hate seeing, because people work really hard to go and cultivate, and then at the end, instead of having a dream for their hard work, they're left with a headache, and it's just it's awful.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of those kind of stories. This past spring, a lot of people still sitting on last year's crop.
Yeah, I think we're just waiting for the regulatory things to work themselves out, so that right now, though I liken it to the fact that the faucet's not even really turned on. There's just drips right now for the most part. In terms of the CBD industry, and that's the really thing, is when you break it down, it's like you have people going for CBD, you have people going for industrial aspects of hemp, you have smokable hemp flower. Now you have all these other novel cannabinoids like CBG or CBC, and you're going to see, I think genetics in the end is the key to everything, with regulations just behind. But in the end, genetics are going to be the things that makes growing more efficient, extracting more efficient. When you get into these THC free variants now, you eliminate having to do any of those separations past whether you're using chromatography or, trying to do spinning band distillate. It's just going to eliminate a lot of those pinches that were there, or those extra steps. And I think that's just, genetics really are the thing that take time. You can't rush genetics. You can rush regulations. You can rush just about every other aspect. But genetics, it just takes time. Because you need to, you got to breed out the issues and back cross, and you're talking, 2-3 years on a good genetics product to get something of semblance of having, consistency.
Do you have a breeding program up there, or you're outsourcing your genetics?
We currently have an in-house program going that was out of state and in Arizona, and we'll be moving into Pennsylvania this season. We can't make anything public yet, but we are in talks with a well-known doctor from one of the major universities in the state that's big into the hemp program, and we're looking to work with him on some smokable genetics, specifically for growing in Pennsylvania.
How about your processing facility? Can you describe what that's like up there?
Well, so last year we kind of went and did a little bit of a makeshift setup, and we were lucky to get out unscathed. For this season, we're going to be building something more permanent that'll allow us to do things more ergonomically than last year. It's the best way to put it.
Yeah, okay.
So we're really focusing on, like I said, for what the style we do, and being that the bulk, we're looking for smokable flower. Obviously, not everything's smokable, so there's extractable stuff that we have to segment out. Last year, we flash froze everything that we're going to use for smoking grade, and save that for hydrocarbon extract for live resin. So that's something that this year we'd probably be doing the same thing with the high CBG strain. Quickly segmenting out the smokable part from the extractable part, getting it flash frozen on the field, which is really important. The terpene loss is pretty significant the moment that you cut the plant from the ground. So You're losing terpenes every minute basically as they're evaporating. So once you get the plant frozen, though, it basically locks everything in. And
how quickly are you getting the plants frozen after harvest?
Within an hour.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, depending on the labor points when we're taking a field down, last year we had the truck right at the field, and just bisecting the plants, cutting the tops off, and, taking the bombs and putting them right into the freezer.
Cool. So what other product lines do you have?
Hempsylvania is going to stay focused on craft, artisanal stuff. We're like, right now we're really focusing on and not going into areas that are going to necessarily get us in trouble. Like I said, till the FDA standards come out, a lot of our beverage line products we want to be able to do, just have that same, that kind of a, pinch there, because of the fact that it's not necessarily going to be able to slide under the Dietary Health and Supplementation Act. So that's what we're really focused on right now, is things that are actionable for that, that don't include the DSHA. But I think it's just a wait and see. I mean, we don't really want to rush a product out to market until the market's ready to receive it either, is the other concept. And, I've seen hit or miss, some of the mass market hemp product. You talk to gas station owners, you talk to convenience store owners, and they tell you there's just not a lot of demand yet. And it's just, I think the lack of education out there on the consumer side, or the lack of standards out there as an industry, are two things that, people are unsure of what they're taking and the safety aspect. So I think as that gets worked out, you're going to see a lot more products be shelf ready and willing to be able to go out and get behind a product like that and not, see it as a risk. And right now it's pretty risky in taking a product and putting it out on the market.
Do you have sort of like a long-term plan? Like, can you take us out 10 years?
Sure. I mean, listen, I would say that the backbone of Hempsylvania was that 2 or 3 years ago, Granger and I, we really sat down, and that's my partner from Colorado, and we figured out where we thought the industry could go in different pathways, and started locking in, domain names or IP around those brands. So I'll be honest with you, I'm really excited about the concept of animals being able to include hemp back in their diet like they did, 70 and 80 years ago in Pennsylvania. It was very common hemp feed in the agricultural industry.
Oh, for thousands of years. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's silly that it's not back in. So, we own hempseedcake.com, and I think we own the real grass-fed meat is a brand that we really want to push. I think that could have some fun. Really, I think feeding animals is really something, you're only as good as what you eat. And ultimately with animals in our supply chain, if we can have healthier, happier animals, then we can be healthier and happier. And I think there's a lot of unnecessary things that are being done to feed animals right now that could be, a lot of things can be helped out by getting some hemp back in their diet. Not a whole hemp diet, but, a good part of their diet.
Do you think the hemp industry has any responsibility towards social justice? And what I mean here is, the war on drugs sort of decimated millions of, families, people of color, while now you see, rich white dudes getting richer from this. Like, where's the responsibility there?
Yeah, no, listen, I think as a society, we have, as a goal, we should at least be striving to. There's no doubt that over the past 50 or 60 years, especially, the criminal justice system really did its toll disproportionately on minorities when it came to especially marijuana, of all drugs. And you would think that now would be an opportunity to kind of right some of the wrongs with that, with implementing some kind of, I wouldn't say like I'm trying to think of what kind of program you'd want to call it, but I mean, I don't see anything that's been done to try and encourage disadvantaged individuals from getting into the game. And that's one thing. In fact, I'll tell you straight up, there was a regulation in our own Pennsylvania regulations this year that I would say disadvantages, decidedly more of an urban type of.
This was the acreage limit.
Yeah,
right?
It's silly.
Yeah.
The indoor of all, and you can bet yourself right there. That's there was no minimums in the years past, and I understand what the PDA goes through in terms of licensure, and they do a great job. Whether it's Sarah or just the job that Russ Redding's done as secretary, they do a fantastic job. But charge more. You know what I'm saying? If it's a difficult thing for them to do because they don't want everyone putting in for a permit for 5 plants for their backyard, charge more. You know what I mean? That's the way you can do it, and it still allow people who don't maybe have, a 2,000 square foot greenhouse sitting around or an acre in the backyard to be able to plant. And that was one thing there that very, it kind of struck me as, well, if you live in the city of Philadelphia or the city of Pittsburgh, where are you going to find an acre or a 2,000 square foot greenhouse?
Right. Space is already limited.
Not realistic. Yeah. So, and I think that's one of those things where it's keeping people from being able to get into it and maybe grow their own, 5, 10 plants and have their own little supply of product. And I don't know if it was meant by design just to preclude that. Like I said, if it's all about diminishing the workload for the hardworking people at the Department of Ag, then just charge a premium for a permit that small. You know what I mean? Just so that it keeps people from just putting in for them just to have them.
Right.
But at least allow that access to it. So they've done a great job with the way the program has changed from 2 years ago to now. I mean, even the online process was super smooth, and with everything going on with COVID-19, I was impressed to be able to get our permits back as quick as we did from from PDA this year. We got temporary authorizations.
Good.
Pretty quick time. So it went really smooth. They did a great job.
Good. Yeah. Cheers to those guys. I have some numbers from them for this year. As of a couple of days ago, there were 623 applications. They approved 560 of them. And I guess about 10% of those were for processors. So that's much more than last year. I think last year there was maybe right around 400 permits.
Yeah. I think the high threes. Yeah. So that's a significant bump up. That's good. I mean, I was undecided on it. I didn't know if a lot of people were going to be, leery about getting into it because they heard of stories of people not being able to sell their crop last year.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it'd be much lower.
Yeah, it's impressive. That's a good thing though, because I mean, we want the industry to flourish. When you're named Hempsylvania, you want nothing more than to see as much hemp being grown in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because that in the end, it obviously serves our name right, and it's going to serve, I think, the Commonwealth right. I think it's a great agricultural commodity that if we manage it the right way, can give some people options in the future.
Jason Hawley from Hempsylvania, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, sir.
And just like that, we come to an end. So this was our 88th full episode. If we were miles per hour and in a DeLorean, we'd be back to the future right now. I'm not sure what that means, but anyway, thank you for listening to today's show. Got some fun stuff lined up for you over the next couple of weeks. Next week, I believe we'll be talking to the leadership chair of the Pennsylvania Hemp Steering Committee. So that's exciting. Tune in next week. Find out who that is. Actually, if you listened to the show a couple of weeks ago, you'll know who it is. Anyway, who am I? I am Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Don't take my word for it. Go out and pick yourself up a copy. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. Check us out on Instagram at LF Podcast Hemp. As always, you can drop me a line, send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com, or call and leave me a message, 717-721-4462. All right, until next time, I will see you in the newspaper. Episode 88 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tinbird Shadow.
Industrial hemp